Well, now to introduce the second of tonight's Film Club movies, Alexander Walker.
The Killing was made after Killer's Kiss in 1956, and it shows a great advance for Stanley Kubrick in terms of the complexity of the plot, the excellence of the actors, and also, I think, again in production values, by reason of the bigger budget, and the presence of a producer, a sympathetic and moneyed man called James B. Harris, who later, in fact, became a film director in his own right. It's an action thriller, too, but in common with Killer's Kiss, it's an action thriller that is treated in a very extraordinary way, that shows up a couple of Kubrick's principal concerns, one dealing with the handling of time, and the other with the perfect plan that goes wrong. You might say that time is of the essence of the racetrack robbery in the film, because instead of perhaps cutting to different parts of the robbery as they're happening, what Kubrick did was to take one of the gang individually and lead him up to a certain point in the robbery, and then to turn the clock back and to concentrate upon another member of the gang, lead him up to the specific point in the raid on the payroll office, a little beyond that, and then flash back to someone else. So consequently, time is always being put back and brought forward. And because of one of the stratagems they use to delay the payout, time is in fact being expanded. It's a very, very clever film. It uses a narrator, and I think this is characteristic of Stanley Kubrick, a director who was a child of the radio age. And as you know, particularly from Orson Welles' famous broadcast of the invasion of the Martians, the narrator could have a very, very imaginative effect upon the listening audience. And in those days, films were made for people who listened too. But it's the perfect plan that goes wrong that I think gives the film its curious Kubrick feel. He was to develop this, especially in Dr. Strangelove, which is based upon a fail-safe plan about an atomic bomb, which is anything but safe. And of course, you'll remember in 2001 there was HAL 9000, the perfect computer that develops a lethal glitch. And in this film, the plot goes wrong because of human nature. Kubrick opens the film by giving us vignettes of the various members of the gang, and I think if you look closely, you see how the character of each of them is going to contribute to the downfall of the plot, or the share-out, at the end. The characters are excellent, excellently played. I suppose Sterling Hayden is probably the only second-magnitude star in the picture, but it draws marvelous performances from the Hollywood School of Character actors like J.C. Flippen, and particularly of Elisha Cook, Jr., who plays the discontented husband of Mary Windsor. And Kubrick, I think, had a feel for this man's obsessional attachment to his wife, who is nothing but a treacherous tramp, that oddly recalls the relationship he's going to develop in Lolita, particularly when Elisha Cook, Jr., fatally wounded, staggers back to settle the score with his wife, who is desperately and almost comically trying to pretend that nothing has happened to this husband, whose shirt front is being so badly stained by the blood from his wounds. There's that element of the grotesque in the film that is also characteristic of Stanley Kubrick. And you'll notice that whenever they pull the raid on the racetrack office, they put on comic masks. And that, too, was an element of the grotesque that Kubrick was to put into A Clockwork Orange. Now, all told, The Killing is one of the most clever action thrillers of its kind, and a film that marks the transition of a director who was finding an international audience with movies that were American thrillers to a director who was finding his own voice in films that could not be mistaken for anything but Stanley Kubrick ones.